Uranus transits seem to have a lot to do with the life force itself, the electrifying of all that is in your life. It's the boost. It's likened to electricity because of its lightning form. Uranus is the sudden release of energy to bring about balance where before there was imbalance, typically. And this electrical impulse stimulates everything that we do, everything indeed. And this makes us restless and want to do that which we're not doing at the moment. And we feel restricted because we've created these restrictions for ourselves, happily, not feeling this extra energy that Uranus brings. And then Uranus comes along and it's just like, well, what am I supposed to do with all this energy? So that's the fundament of it. And that gets translated into our consciousness as the will to freedom. And if we just think of Uranus as representative of freedom, we're not really wrong. It's just a secondary derivation. The first derivation would be energy, beyond humans' normal capacity to deal with energy. It's like a higher dimension of energy. And this has an impact on all aspects of being. On the physical sense, which we'll study a bit more when we come to Mars, it makes us energetic, it makes us being able to do physical things. Now, on the mental level, it's quite disturbing to the mind. We think thoughts that we haven't thought before, and we think more quickly, and we talk more quickly, and I'm trying to demonstrate that in the way I'm presenting myself here, where you've got to really keep up with me. And on the emotional level, Uranus suddenly gives you something to deal with emotionally, an opportunity or a loss or something, and that happens again and again and again, and you keep on having your emotional stability and tranquility shattered. Uranus transiting planets does not bring calm and peace. So that's the general energy of Uranus. It's like, shaky and fast. So we have this capacity within us, and Uranus in our chart will show us where that is most likely to enact, according to the house position, according to the sign, and so on. Now, the transits of Uranus, let's start with the Uranus square Uranus. This is around, let's say, 21. The Uranus cycle of 42 years is quite regular, actually. And at the age of 21, we're going through a square, Uranus square Uranus. And it is typical, it is almost archetypal, almost a given, that around that kind of age, when kids are actually finding themselves not to be kids anymore, not even to be teenagers anymore, but something's happening, they're kind of becoming adults. And they don't know how to do that. But they do know that the parents are not the model they want anymore. That might have been okay for a while, but right now we want to move away from the parental attitude. And this is the first kind of attitude of Uranus, one of rebelliousness. There are two aspects of freedom, freedom to and freedom from. And freedom to has to do with imagination. If we can't imagine it, then we're not free to do it. Freedom from means that if we're imprisoned, restricted, either by parents or habit or whatever, we're not free to do what we want to do. So freedom to, freedom from, both aspects of Uranus need to be looked at a little bit differently. So this first square is that which moves us away from the nest. We go out and we try to fly, and we stumble around a bit and have our own little funny way of doing it, and eventually we learn how to do that on our own steam. So that's the first square. And then we come to the opposition at age 42, around then. And the Uranus opposition is looking very carefully indeed, even though it's very quick, at what we're doing in our adulthood. We've had 20 years of trying to be an adult. How are we getting on? And for the most part, okay, so this is our life track. We've set a track in life. And yet, in order to set that track, to commit ourselves to a given line of development, to deepen ourselves, we've had to forego some of our freedoms. Let's say in the typical situation, you're committed to a relationship and you're committed to a career structure. Age 42, both of those have to be looked at again, because they are restrictions. Commitments are restrictive. They might well deepen our life experience and enhance our opportunities towards depth and even breadth. But Uranus wants free of any restriction at all, actually, and those of them that can withstand the Uranus transit are stronger, that they deserve to last, as it were. So around that sort of 42 years period, you might start to get a bit restless about your home life. Am I really with the right partner? Can't my kids leave home now and leave me alone? That kind of feeling of wanting to be more yourself alone. And when it comes to career, you might actually go through a career change. And of course, these things are according to your own particular way of expressing Uranus. As I mentioned, that depends upon your sign and your house and your aspects. And we've each got our own way of optimizing freedom or expressing freedom in an unusual way. So, for example, my Uranus is in the 6th house, so I have to be self-employed. It's a requirement for me. I just cannot work for anyone else. And it's actually conjunct the descendant. So one-to-one relationship for me has to be a little bit bizarre or unusual in some way, or I can't do it. I have to have some measure of freedom from society within the context of the relationship. So the relationship gives me freedom from the standard way of doing things, hence the unusualness of my relationships in some cases, or freedom from relationship. There are times when it's just too restrictive for me. That's because of my Uranus position in my natal chart. Well, all of us will be going through something of this type, according to your own restrictions around that age of 42. And the purpose of this is it needs to be understood if we're to understand how to deal with what's going on. The purpose is not to destroy and break up that which is working. That's absurd. Uranus, if we can say it has a purpose at all, is actually the tool by which we move away from constraints that perhaps were appropriate once and are not anymore for the next stage of our journey, which is to express much more of the life force. When it is said that life begins at 40, it may well be that the Uranus opposing Uranus transit underlines this general idea. And to be honest, it does. What happens before that kind of midlife period is very often an assimilation of parental teachings and societal teachings and so on, and peer group pressure. And when you get to that midlife period, you get to understand that actually now you're at the top of the hill, and from now on it's downhill. Now you can look at that both ways. You're no longer on the up and up and up in one sense. But on the other sense, you've got further to go if you can be free to walk your own path, to dance to your own music. And that kind of Uranus opposing Uranus transit, you won't be able to dance to anyone else's tune. It's just not going to give that possibility to you. You have to do your own thing in your own way, or you're going to feel broken inside. And that's not okay. This short period there's a short window of opportunity here where Uranus is energizing you in a way that you have not familiarity with. This energy is enough for you to break away from the restrictions, the sticky tentacles of requirements of society and expectations of your partner and demands of your kids and the boss's unreasonable requests and so on, all of those things that hold you in place, they require an oomph to break. And Uranus gives you that. Not only does Uranus give you the motivation to break away from restrictive conditions, it also gives you the energy to do that. So basic understanding of a Uranus transit across the board, not only Uranus opposition, but across the board, is that there is this twin gift of restlessness and energetic support for moving away from that which makes you restless. One of the biggest questions that Uranus asks you is, what for you is freedom? And you're going to have that tested around this 42-year-old period. The definition of freedom is different for us all. The feeling of it, the requirements of it, the proof of it, all of these things are different for each of us. And we have to come up with our own sense of what do we need to do in order to be free? And perhaps more importantly, what do we need to stop doing to feel freedom? So Uranus, the freedom to do what you want to do. Now, when it crosses by conjunction, opposition, or square, any one of the angles, so let's take the ascendant first, your total way of being, your presentation to the world becomes a little bit strange. You may well take on eccentric habits at this point. You may be dressing differently, speaking differently, hanging out with strange types of people, behaving in a way that your normal society that you've been with for quite some time, they look at you and they think, what on earth is going on with you? You're behaving strangely. So that's the Uranus transit energy. And you know, you want to do more. You have energy to do more, and you want that energy expressed. It's quite difficult not to express that. So you might do something strange. Now, this is the time when the guy who's been happily married for 20 years suddenly buys a ridiculously expensive red sports car and has a mistress. You know, that's the kind of archetypal story of the energy. And the woman might go off and do some strange hobby like seances or you know, some weird stuff. You know, it would be different for the genders, but your friends would look at you and they'd think, what on earth is going on? So that's Uranus. Now, when it's crossing the midheaven, and therefore the nadir as well, very often you're going to have a career change. Most particularly, that goes along with a shift of residence. Typically, our midheaven and our IC do the same thing or the opposing thing at the same time. So if you move home, you have to take up a new job. If you change jobs, very often you have to move home. Or as you progress, as you are promoted, you get more money and you buy a better home, and so on. So they're very connected. And when Uranus crosses that axis, this unsettled restlessness makes it much, much more likely that you're going to move home and get another job on the simple level. But it's not really about the job. It's about the reputation that goes with actually both of these two things. If you've got a certain kind of house and a certain kind of job, you're known as a certain kind of person. And that doesn't work for you anymore. Uranus wants your reputation to change. Now, reputation is no small thing. If you're known as such and such a person, there's a tremendous social pressure for you to be that kind of person and continue being that way. So you might be seen as a doctor or an accountant or a factory worker or a polite person or an artist or whatever society thinks of you as. Not your close friends, but society generally. And that may well shift. You may well drop out of a commitment. You might take on a commitment even. Uranus can do that, strangely, because it has the energy to do things it didn't used to be able to do. So crossing the midheaven is a good time to look for these kind of things where your reputation goes through a radical shift. Now the other transits, the transits to the Sun, would be quite a profound shock, almost like a future shock. Sometimes you just beetle through life and then you can't wake up to realize, oh my God, I'm older and I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore, and they won't let me do that anymore. And you think, what's at the other end? And you start to face the future with a sense of, oh my God, I haven't prepared for this. So future shock, being aware that the future is inevitable. You've set up conditions whereby certain things are bound to happen because of what you've done so far. And that shock of, if I don't stop doing this, then that unpleasant event will occur. So you get those kind of experiences. But similarly, you also get the experience of sudden kind of awareness of your potential being much greater than you thought. Going back to this idea of the energizing principle of Uranus, if you've got enough energy, you can do anything. You can just do everything you do wrongly and correct it because you've got the energy. Just try things out and just wait until one works if you've got the energy to do it. And that's what Uranus gives you. So, I mean, the whole of life is trial and error, so you can make as many errors as you like with Uranus there, because you can just get on and do another one and another. So, at this kind of period, let's say Uranus making an aspect to your Sun, you're going to think of yourself as having a greater potential because you've got the energy to make it so. However, some of that energy needs to be applied to breaking away from what binds you to what you're expected to be. And what's left is enough to project you into what you choose to be. On the Moon level, the same kind of thing is going to happen, but on a deeper, unconscious level. The Moon really does represent the forces that bind us to the past. Mother's love, which we are never fully weaned of, and the expectations of our tribe and our family and so on. These huge social pressures that make us feel safe and make us feel a sense of belonging and enable us to hold on to the baby self. Those things are lunar, those are moon issues. And when Uranus comes along and makes an aspect to those, the moon really isn't comfortable with that. The moon doesn't like to change anything. The moon wants to continue doing what it does. It is known to be the agency of change, or the planet which enables us to accommodate change, but it doesn't really change anything on the underlying foundation level of life. That's what it is. It is the foundation of our feelings of security and stuff. So Uranus might come along and aspect the moon, and those are, well, broken up, washed away, removed. A lot of our security systems are taken out when Uranus transits. It's shocking, it's painful, it's something that we don't really want, and yet it is liberating. Once we've gone through this experience, and usually, it's going to be fast. Uranus doesn't plan and allow time for assimilate. It delivers its message immediately, and you either get it or die. That's what a lightning bolt is, isn't it? You just see everything suddenly, or it hits you and you die. And Uranus transits are a little bit like that, although I speak in hyperbole. You either get the blast of energy and the insight to move, and you do it immediately, spontaneously. You don't plan it. That wouldn't help. Uranus is not that small. Our plans are very small indeed, but Uranus isn't like that. So you either do it immediately, trusting your insight, or you've lost it. So those people who have not the clarity, courage, willingness, circumstances to spontaneously trust their urges, they don't get the Uranus transits fully, and certainly not comfortably. Whereas, like somebody like myself, I've got an angular Uranus, as I mentioned. Uranus transits are great for me. I just do it because I'm that way anyway. I tend not to plan. I tend to do most of what I do spontaneously because of my Uranus being angular. So for me, Uranus is really lovely. I just get to do more of that. But for those of people who don't like to move without control and plans and agreements and so on and so forth, they would find it very difficult, especially on a Uranus Moon transit. When Uranus is transiting your Mercury, your head explodes with a very uncomfortable, overwhelming number of new thoughts, ideas, and so on that can be brilliant and genius level ideas and then be gone a day later. It is very uncomfortable indeed and very exciting. The only way you can deal with that is to write down your ideas. Immediately you have them. And I've got batches and batches and batches of paper with my ideas written down on them when I'm going through this Uranus experience. You have to get it out. This Uranus-Mercury energy is very difficult, but it gives you the access to a moment of genius. This is when you'll just understand what you're doing, what you can do on that level. It's really good. Uranus-Venus. Yeah, well, you're not going to want to be too restrained and constricted in your relationships, and you're going to behave with odd people and like to meet eccentrics and that kind of thing, and be an eccentric in a relationship. Uranus-Mars, rather dangerous, I would say. You've got to be a little bit careful with that. This is the accident prone. This is the violent type of person. Energetic, but rash. Impulsive, adventurous, and rather silly sometimes in what they do. Uranus-Jupiter, the enlightenment experience. You just suddenly see where you could expand your consciousness. Uranus-Saturn, strain between the forces of authority and the forces of freedom within you. So authority issues, difficult, very difficult, but major breakthroughs occur, and you can reset the authority boundaries to a point that allows more liberation. So, exciting times, very energizing.